Like many people today, I wear a lot of hats, and I don't just mean the one on my head. I mean that I do a lot of things in my life. You may know me from Land Whale Overland and my overlanding content, but I'm also a husband, I'm a doctor, I write novels, but also, and the one I identify with the most, is that I'm a father to three beautiful children. And I've spent so much time away from them because of the nature of my work. When you tally it all up, 5 or 6 months out of the year, I'm not home. And that just really started to dawn on me about how much time I'm spending away from them and how limited my time is with them, and why I really try to focus on spending every moment that I have with them, teaching them and showing them all these things I've learned how to do. And that got me thinking, it's not just me, or my dad was a physician as well, and he was constantly busy. It's not just environments like that. There's a lot of reasons why your parents may not have had the time they wish they had to teach you things. So I wanted to start a YouTube series called Things Your Dad Didn't Get a Chance to Teach You. And this is going to be the start of those videos. And it's less about the overlanding content and more about just basic stuff that it would be great if someone could teach you. So this is going to be honestly a safe place for anybody to ask questions. I am not an expert in any of these things, but I've learned how to do a lot of stuff just because I've needed to learn how to do them. And if this helps even one person out there feel a little bit less intimidated about what something is, like a tool in the garage, or how to do something like patching a hole in a wall, I hope this helps. Now, this is a huge tool chest, and you really don't need one this big, but this was a gift from my wife and kids several years ago, and I have kind of populated it with the things that I use for a little bit of everything. Fixing stuff around the house, working on the land whale. I do a lot of carpentry and woodworking, so I've accumulated a bunch of stuff for that. So we're going to run through these things, and you definitely won't need all of them. Many of those may feel unnecessary, and that's okay. Just populate it with the things that you'll want to start doing. And honestly, if you don't know where to start, just get a simple homeowner's toolkit from any of the big box stores. Big box means Lowe's or Home Depot if you're in the United States, or a similar store. Just one of those chain tool and home improvement stores will almost always have a toolkit labeled home toolkit or something like that, which gives you the basics to cover most of what you need to do. But for me, at the top here, this is kind of like a staging area where I keep things I'm actively working on. There's a light, Bluetooth speakers, safety goggles are always important, little odds and ends. This is also where I keep things like driver bits for like a powered screwdriver or a drill, or drill bits to use in a drill to, drill into different materials. There's all sorts of different kinds of drill bits. We'll talk about those more in a later video, but this is kind of where I keep all that staging stuff. So let's talk about the drawers. You don't have to organize your tool chest exactly the way I do, but in this drawer I keep things like, these are called chisels for woodworking. This is where you take small little slivers of wood or make, a fine level platform. These are called rasps, or files. They're for kind of, finessing the edge of something that feels sharp or roughed down, and making it a little bit smoother. In this drawer below, I keep things like this. These are called hole punches. If you're working on a softer material like wood or even metal, you can use a hole punch to start a hole or to make a hole in something, and they come in different widths and thicknesses. And there are some that are spring-loaded, so that as you press them in, once you get to a certain point, they're going to push and click and generate a little bit of an impact to kind of deepen the hole a little bit. That's what lives in this drawer. This is what I call my measurements drawer. So things like, this is a multimeter. I have these are called speed squares, or just a square where they're a way that you have a good right angle and can make basic measurements. These are really common in carpentry, like framing work if you're building a house and putting studs in. Speaking of studs, this is a stud detector. So you hold the button down and you move this along the wall and it will tell you where the stud, which is the wooden frame inside the wall, is. So if you're doing something like hanging a picture or a towel bar in a bathroom or something like that, this will help you find where the wood is. And I'll show you how to use this in other videos, and we'll talk about those at that time. Other things that live in here are things like this is a bubble level, or just a level, and what it does is when you want to check how flat something is, you put it on there and you watch the bubbles, and the bubbles should be in between the black lines. So for this is fairly level. The bubble is mostly in between the black line. You could use it this way and use this one, or that last one is for an angle. I also keep tape measures in this drawer. This is a tape measure, and basically it's called that because it lets out this metal tape that has measurements on it, and will let you measure things and tell you the length or the distance between the span of the tape. Now, one thing I've always seen people ask about is why is there a little bit of play in this metal tab at the end of a tape measure? And the reason that's there is so that if you're pushing against something, it flattens up to the edge of the tape, but if you're pulling against something, it'll bring the edge of the tape right to the edge of what you're pulling on. So that is actually supposed to be there. You don't want to take that out. So that was my measurements drawer. Let's move to the other side. On this side, this is a drawer where I keep all sorts of specialized drill bits. So drill bits that are bigger or longer than the ones you might find in one of those multi-kits. Now, something like this you might want to use if you're going not just into the first layer of a wall, but through a wall. Like, let's say you needed to move a wire from outside a house to inside the house, you'd probably need a big, long, robust drill bit like that. Or if you need to make a wider hole, these are called spade drill bits, and they can make a really nice wide hole in things like wood. But something like this, you really only want to use on wood. They're not made for anything else, and they're also going to make a fast but very rough hole, so you'll have to smooth it out later. Another thing I keep in this drawer are what are called step drill bits. So let's say you're not sure exactly the size of the hole you need to make, but you know you need to make one. So you can use one of these and progressively make the hole larger. It'll tell you the size of the hole as you're moving down. It's also great if you're working with a material that tends to be hard to make a big hole in. You can increase the hole gradually in something like, metal or something like that. You can use something like this to make a hole that'll get progressively wider, and it won't be as difficult to make that big hole right away. The next drawer down is where I keep things like utility knives. So these are utility knives. Some people call them box cutters. They're a very standard, simple bladed knife with easily replaceable blades that you can use for just about everything. This is also where I keep things like jigsaw blades. I'll talk about jigsaw blades when we get to power tools and things like that. There's a lighter in here, a pair of scissors, so all sorts of things tend to live in this drawer, but it's mostly about sharp stuff. And this drawer I just call my clamps drawer. Now, I mentioned that I do a lot of woodworking, and if you've ever worked with wood, a lot of it is assembly not just with screws but with glue, and you want to make sure that you can hold things in certain places when you're using them or working on them. So this is where I keep a lot of different kinds of clamps to work on wood when I'm holding things together, or more specialized clamp to smooth surfaces together, things like that. So that's where a lot of clamps live. So that's the top half of this drawer, and now we're going to spend a little bit more time going through these lower drawers, which is where all of my hand tools are. And hand tools can feel intimidating because there's so much and so many. You don't need as many as I have. Again, a basic homeowner's toolkit will get you through most things, but I'll show you what I have, how I kind of organize it, or in some cases don't organize it, but it'll give you an idea of some of the things that I keep. And again, this is mostly just to tackle things around the house or on the vehicle, or just to help me do stuff if I need to figure out something. Now, I won't be in the frame as much because these drawers are lower, but this first drawer, this is where I keep a lot of things like screwdrivers, or my starter hand tools. So there's a lot of, these are fixed screwdrivers, and for screwdrivers there's two main kinds. There is a flathead, which is fairly easy to tell because it's just a straight blade across. These are called Phillips, and they're the ones that, if you look at the end of it, it looks like a plus sign or a cross. And they come in different sizes, but these are your two basic screwdrivers. There's a lot of other things in here. There are screwdrivers that can accept multiple bits. So a lot of screwdrivers will have a removable end where you can swap from one side, which on this one it's a flathead, and go to a Phillips on the other side. This particular one, the whole barrel comes out and can switch around. And then you have different things on the other side. So something like this can be great to keep around because you get multiple pieces of utility all in one driver. Another thing that could be helpful to you, this is called a ratcheting screwdriver. So you set the direction to either in or out. Remember, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So if you're turning your hand with my right hand, if I'm spinning it to the right, that would loosen this screw because when that was the ratchet sound you're hearing. So then when I'm spinning my hand, there's no ratchet sound, so that means that's where the device is going to lock in. And by going to the left, I'm going to loosen whatever I'm screwing into. But if I switch it the other way, the ratchet goes to the left, but then when I'm turning my hand is turning to the right or turning clockwise, and that's going to tighten whatever I'm screwing into. So righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Other things that live in here, there's different other ratcheting screwdrivers. There's little accessories to say I need to get into a right angle or a really tight turn. This can help me do that. So lots of mostly screwdrivers live in there. The next drawer down is where I keep things like wrenches. So now wrenches come in all kinds and shapes and sizes. There's big ones, there's small ones, there's different sizes, and then to make things complicated, there's metric and SAE or imperial measurements. So in the United States, we use fractions of an inch. So things like a 3/8 inch wrench or a 1/2 inch wrench are on this side. Whereas most other places you'll find things like millimeters, 10 millimeter wrench or a 14 millimeter wrench. So all of these are what live in this drawer. Now there's different kinds, like I said. I tend to use this kind the most. Let me get a bigger one for you to see. And these are called ratcheting wrenches. So just like that screwdriver ratcheted, this can also ratchet. So depending on which way you flip the whole wrench, whether it's on the one side or the other, you can either tighten or loosen something. And these are for bolts. Bolts, I'll show you in a second, but those are what you would use a wrench like this for. And I keep all sorts of sizes in here, so that way whatever I'm working on I can just grab the wrench I need. If you don't want to keep so many but you like the ratcheting thing, there are multiple sized double end ratcheting wrenches where you can select the side you need. This one, for example, has 5/8, 3/4, 9/16, and 11/16 of an inch. You can flip this little lever to say if you want to go in or out with on that bolt, and then you'll have a ratcheting wrench. So a couple of those in different sizes might do you well. There's also offset wrenches where if you're looking at it from the side, the back is just a little bit angled in case you need a little bit of leverage or have a weird angle you're trying to get onto the bolt or nut that you're trying to loosen. There is a socket set here, but I'll talk about that in a second once we get to sockets. But let me show you how these ratchets work on a bolt. Okay, I've got a bolt and a nut here. So the part which has the threads, which are these metal grooves, and the longer one, that's the bolt. That's what will go through the hole, and the nut will secure it from the back side. So you can spin it with your hand pretty freely, but these ones are sized, I think, for 7/16 of an inch. So yeah, you can see that just perfectly fits in there. So now if I wanted to wrench this bolt, I could do this, and right now I would be loosening that bolt, or I could go the other way, and now I would be tightening that bolt. And it's the same thing on the nut side. If I put this on, now it's loosening, or if I go the other way, now it's tightening. So that's how a wrench will work on a nut and bolt. The next drawer down beneath those is where I keep my sockets. Now again, this looks overwhelming. You don't need all this stuff. I'm going to keep saying that. You only need a basic simple set. But this is where all my sockets live. So if we use the idea of a bolt again, you could use a wrench on it, or for a little bit better leverage or control in some scenarios, you can use a socket. So the way a socket works, we're going to take the same, this is also 7/16, and the socket would go right over the end and allow you to turn and open and close this. It doesn't work as well usually on the nut sides because there's a limit to how far that socket can go before it hits the back end of it. So in this case, it wouldn't work well for the nut, but on the bolts, it'll work really well. So then how do you use this little thing? Trying to use this with your fingers won't really help. Well, that's where these ratcheting wrenches come in. This functions the same way that ratcheting wrench did before, but this handle lets you attach a socket. So some of them you'll see will have a little button on the back. That button moves this ball, and you push it in so that way you can slide the socket in. When you let it go, that socket is pretty securely held. And then you'll be able to put this right on there and move it open or close. And just like with those multiple selecting wrenches, you can flip this little switch to move it in or out. So the good thing about these, they can give you more leverage. You can have a ton of sizes, and you don't need to keep one of those other kinds of wrenches. Sometimes they're called monkey wrenches. You don't need to keep one of these in every single size. A socket set can be a nice compact way to both access and use all those bolts, but do it in a really small and smaller footprint. There's tons of different sizes, but what you may not see on camera is there's a lot of overlap between different sizes. There are 3 different sizes of wrench here. There's a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch, and then a 3/8 inch, and then a 1/2 inch wrench in here. These are different extensions to get you better reach. So there's a lot of overlap between these sockets. So this is a pretty complex and big kit, but again, you don't need all of this. The next drawer down, this is where I keep things like vice grips and pliers and things like that. So let's talk about them. This is a small set of needle nose pliers, and then over here is a larger set of needle nose pliers. So if you need to get into somewhere and kind of pinch on something with a little bit more strength than a set of tweezers, you can use a set of needle nose pliers. Now these are different where one end is smooth on this one. So this wouldn't be for gripping like a screw or getting a whole lot of leverage, but if you just needed to kind of grab something that was really in an awkward place. This one does have grooves on the end, so it's a little bit more force to grab something with. The next thing that's in this drawer, this is a pair of wire cutters. So really simply, if I'm working on things like speaker wire or electrical wire or any other kind of cable, I can use these to cut those. You'll see that most of the pliers in here, once you get to a certain size, like the needle nose have them, and then this one, which I think most people call them lineman pliers, they have a cutting area in here that'll also work for cutting wire. And then these are toothed as well, so these can provide a lot of grip to really get onto something that's stuck. This is an adjustable wrench, so you spin this screw with your thumb and it tells you what kind of size you're working on. So if you're not sure what size bolt you want to get to, you can get access with one of these. This can be a way to get a grip onto a bolt of an unsure size. These are called channel locks. There's a channel here, and you lock the position of the channel in place, and then it gives you an adjustable jaw to clamp onto something. So if you move it all the way down, now you have this huge jaw to work with. Move it all the way in, you got a nice tight jaw. And then those come in different sizes. There's a lot of other stuff in here that are mostly related to electrical wiring, things like wire strippers, if you need to cut the sheathing off the wire, or crimpers and terminal lug crimpers and things like that. We'll talk about those in a later video when it comes to electrical. The last drawer in here I want to talk about, this is where I keep things like hammers, mallets, and other heavier, bigger odds and ends. This is called a caulking gun for things like putting caulk around caulk, things like a toilet or a bathtub so they don't leak. All of that lives in that drawer. So that's what lives in my tool chest. And I know it feels like a lot, but remember, you don't need all of this. I've said that so many times, and that's okay. A simple homeowner's toolkit, or even just a simple set of tools, will get you by with most of the things. Don't feel like you need to go out and buy every tool all at once. Buy what you need when you need it. And if you don't need it, you're going to end up accumulating a lot of stuff that you won't really use. I do use pretty much everything in here all the time to fix stuff, or either around the house or with the cars or anything like that. So hopefully you found this little walkthrough interesting. Again, the whole point of this channel is for people to not be afraid to ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question, especially here. If you want to learn how do I use a screwdriver, show me how to use a screwdriver, absolutely, just let me know in the comments below and I'll make a video on that. If you want to learn more about how ratchets and bolts work, or what if you're not sure what size you need, I can make a video on that. So anything you guys want to cover, or you want me to cover, let me know in the comments below. Other things I'm going to be talking about are things like power tools, like what's the difference between a drill and an impact driver? How do I cut wood? What kind of saws do I need? What kind of wood do I need? What's the difference between wood? How do I do electrical wiring? How do I solder? How do I stay safe when I'm doing electrical wiring? Things like that. So there's a lot I plan to cover on this channel, and whatever you guys are interested in, we'll try to get to those videos first. As always, if you found this content interesting, a like or a subscribe will really help the algorithm and will help me get exposure to what kind of content interests you. And I'd love to make more of these videos for you guys, so it helps me to know what interests you. And if you have any questions, like I said, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time.